I live with my husband Siegfried's parents. My father-in-law, Alistair, is considerate towards me, but my mother-in-law, Violet, has always seen me as an adversary. It seems she thinks I'm being spoiled all the time. In reality, that's not the case, but Violet is quite envious and it bothers her immensely. Because of that, she subjects me to daily harassment. One day, everyone except me was going on a trip. Just before Violet left, she asked me to tidy up the luggage and led me to the basement. After I finished carrying the luggage, I noticed Violet behind me, and suddenly, the door slammed shut and I heard the sound of a lock clicking. I was trapped in the freezing basement.
Huh? Please let me out! Open the door!
I'll open it for you in 3 days. Well then, I'm off for the trip. In the freezing basement with no cell phone or anything else, I tried to figure out how to escape. But no method came to mind, so I decided to wait, eating the stocked provisions I found by chance. 3 days later, Violet came back humming a tune. She laughed as she headed to the basement, imagining me shivering and curled up from the cold. But I was not there. My name is Elsa. I am 26 years old and work as a nail technician. I met my husband Siegfried through a mutual acquaintance and we got married last year. Since we both had just started working and had little money, we decided to live with his parents to receive financial support. While Alistair was happy about the lively household, Violet didn't think much of it. This was partly due to Alistair and Siegfried's actions. Every time I cleaned up the dishes after meals, Siegfried would say, "Oh, I'll take care of it. Elsa, why don't you go take a bath?" And when I was carrying heavy loads, Alistair would help out. "Oh, Elsa, that's dangerous. I'll carry it for you." Violet didn't like that I was being pampered by Alistair and Siegfried. Whenever we were alone, she would always complain. "Must be nice to be treated so kindly." Well, it will end in a week. After that, you'll have to do everything by yourself. Be prepared. Despite her words, it's been a year since we started living together, and it hasn't changed. Because of this, Violet's actions escalated. "You're the only outsider in this house. Yet, you're the most favored. I can't stand it. I don't see any gratitude for being allowed to live here. I'm sorry." Every day, while Alistair and Siegfried were kind to me, Violet would complain. At first, I discussed this with Siegfried, but he said he was treating Violet the same way. "I'm not particularly nice only to you. I treat Mom and Dad the same way." I also didn't think Siegfried was exceptionally nice to me. He seemed to treat everyone equally, but Violet overreacted. "When you and Alistair act kind to me, she always complains about it. Maybe she's just particularly aware of you. Well, eventually she'll stop." I hope so. I had suddenly moved into the house where the three of them lived. As their son's wife, no less. Violet probably wasn't used to living together yet. I thought it was understandable for her to take it out on me and believed that eventually, her mean behavior would stop. But as I ignored and let it pass, it escalated even further. At first, she only seemed to be in a bad mood when talking to Alistair or Siegfried. But lately, she's been getting angry over the smallest things. "Hey! You were just making tea carelessly, weren't you? Did you check the temperature properly?" No. Her yelling made me tense up. "This is why I can't stand uneducated women. Listen, don't make coffee carelessly with the electric kettle. When you cut corners, I end up embarrassed later. Oh, I heard the neighbor's daughter-in-law is so elite and beautiful, but our situation is just the worst." Recently, she's been saying nasty things while looking me straight in the eye. And she doesn't hold back, even in front of Alistair or Siegfried. Elsa, did you clean this room? It looks nice. Thanks.
Oh, no. It's actually easier to clean a little every day, so it's really nothing.
When Alistair praised me, thinking I was beaming with pride, she would cut in with a snide remark. Really, you haven't done much. Look, there's dust here. See, my hand is all black. You just clean the visible parts and get praised. How nice for you. It doesn't matter. We'll do a big clean together at the end of the year. Alistair defended me from her heartless words. This only made her scowl more and complain. My in-laws arguing about me has become more frequent, and the house is tense.
I'll clean it properly now, so you two can relax and enjoy your tea.
Every day, I would act as a mediator, resolving the issues one by one. One day, we were having dinner together, and Siegfried started talking about his plans for next week. From Thursday to Sunday afternoon next week, there's a company ski trip. I'll bring back some souvenirs. Alistair, surprised, added,
Oh, what a coincidence. I also have a golf outing with my friends from Friday to Sunday morning next week.
Hearing this, Violet seemed unhappy about being alone with me next week and said,
If everyone's gone, maybe I should take a trip too.
Sounds good. It's important to refresh yourself. Elsa, what about you? When Siegfried asked me, I thought about going on a trip too, but worried about her making snide comments about where I'd get the money, I chose to stay home.
Well, I'll stay and look after the house.
When I said that, Violet smirked. If I had said I would go on a trip too, she would have openly shown her displeasure. I felt relieved that I chose to stay, but little did I know this decision would lead to a terrible ordeal. Unaware of this, I naively thought about having some luxurious meals while they were away. A few days later, she decided to go on a trip from Friday to Monday evening.
I'm looking forward to a hot spring trip with my friends after so long.
She hummed as she packed her travel bag. Siegfried and Alistair also began their preparations. Where did I put my golf bag?
If it's golf-related, I saw it in the basement earlier. I'll help you carry it.
So we went to the basement. It was freezing there without any heating. Quickly, we started working to bring the golf equipment upstairs. Thanks, Elsa. I couldn't have done it alone in this cold.
Oh, no problem. Just let me know if you need help with anything else.
After helping Alistair, I also finished helping Siegfried. Sorry. Can you get my pajamas and clothes ready for the next 3 days?
Sure.
Everyone was rushing around the house, repeatedly grabbing necessary items for the trip. The atmosphere was hectic as we moved around busily. Finally, it seemed like we had managed to finish all the preparations for the trip, and everyone sighed in relief in the living room. Phew, getting ready for a trip is so exhausting. Starting tomorrow, Siegfried, Alistair, and then Violet will each go on their respective trips. We decided to have a final meal together and made hot pot. The next day, Siegfried left for his company trip. I'm leaving. If anything happens, call me immediately. Siegfried left the house, looking worried about me. Early the following morning, while everyone else was still asleep, Alistair also left. Violet was the last to leave, but until then, it was just the two of us for the first time in a while. I wondered if she would say something to me before her trip. Cautiously, I waited until Violet left the house. After finishing breakfast, Violet called me into the kitchen. This is the portable stove we used when we all had hot pot last time. It's too big to store in the kitchen, so could you take it back to the basement? Expecting a sarcastic remark, I was surprised by the simple request. Relieved, I agreed to her request.
Understood. I'll take it down now since I have some time.
Thanks. Violet smiled slightly at me, raising the corners of her mouth. It was unusual, but I guessed she was in high spirits because of the upcoming trip. Without realizing Violet was following me, I carried the portable stove to the basement and, at that moment, the basement door slammed shut.
What?
I initially thought the wind had closed the door and didn't worry as I walked towards it. Then I heard the sound of the lock turning. The door handle wouldn't budge when I tried to open it.
What?
Hearing my panicked voice, Violet started giggling from the other side of the door. Hee hee. I'm going on my trip now.
What? Wait. Please open the door.
Even though I knocked hard, I could only hear the sound of Violet walking away. My face turned pale. I heard the front door open and then close as she locked it. It seemed I was completely locked in.
It's so cold. What should I do?
The basement was freezing. The living room was always warm, with the heater on, so I was in light clothing. I thought about using the portable stove to warm up, but the risk of a fire made me hesitate. I never imagined I would be locked in here, so I had left my phone in the living room. The earliest to return would be Alistair, but even that was in 3 days. I couldn't go to the bathroom, and the cold was draining my energy. I wondered how I would survive in this room until everyone came back. Imagining the worst, tears started to flow. But crying wouldn't change anything. I desperately searched the basement for anything that could help me survive. I found some canned tuna and instant food. They were likely stocked for emergencies like earthquakes or disasters. I ate them to regain some energy. There were also camping supplies Siegfried had bought during his brief camping phase. While the phase had passed quickly, leaving only a tent and a folding chair in the basement, the chair at least helped keep me off the cold floor. I tried to make the best of what was available to create a more comfortable space, but it was challenging. In the end, all I found useful were the chair and the instant food. I had no idea what time it was. Curled up in a small ball on the chair, I heard a sound coming from the front door.
Huh?
At first, I thought it was a hallucination brought on by the cold. But I kept hearing someone rummaging around, as if they had come home. If it was Violet, I would be in trouble, but I hoped it was Alistair or Siegfried and yelled out.
Help me!
When I shouted, the rummaging stopped, and it felt like they were listening to my voice, so I called for help again. Then the footsteps grew louder, and I heard someone frantically trying to unlock the door. When the basement door opened, the person probably didn't expect to find me there. Whoa! I thought I heard a voice, but I didn't expect anyone to actually be here. But anyway, why are you in a place like this? It was Alistair who had come home. The moment the basement door opened, tears of relief streamed down my face. Let's talk in the living room for now. It's cold here, come on up quickly. In the warm living room after several hours, I collapsed in relief.
I thought I was going to be stuck there for 3 days. I'm so glad you came, Alistair. Thank you so much. You're my lifesaver.
I thanked him through my tears, and Alistair made me some hot cocoa while he explained. It was really just by chance that I came back. There was a golf event, and I forgot my golf shoes. I rushed back to get them. Everyone said rentals would be fine, but I insisted on my favorite ones to get my best score, so I came back for them. Because Alistair forgot his shoes, I was saved. I guess I was lucky.
So, why were you in there? And how did the door get locked from the outside?
Alistair seemed to realize something as he asked the question.
Did Violet do this?
At his words, I shivered and couldn't hide the truth. Alistair put his head in his hands. I see. He took out his phone and made a call. I thought he might be calling Violet, so I watched closely. But he was calling his golf buddies. Hey, sorry, there's been an emergency, so I won't be able to join you for the trip. I'll make it up to you next time, I promise. Hearing this, I felt a surge of guilt along with surprise.
What? No, it's okay. Alistair, you should go back.
I said while he was still on the phone, but he went ahead and canceled anyway. After hanging up, I apologized again. I'm sorry. Your important trip got ruined because of me. Alistair spoke gently to me. I can go golfing anytime. I'm about to retire soon anyway. He even cracked a joke to lighten the mood. He was trying to ease my guilt. More importantly, can you tell me exactly what happened? He asked, and I explained the morning's events in detail. Then, as soon as I put away the portable stove, the door was locked. I was in the basement for about 3 hours.
3 hours in that cold place.
Alistair sympathized with my feelings and was angry for me. But thanks to you, it was only 3 hours. If it weren't for you, everyone would have been back on Sunday. Now, it's just a slightly chilling story. When I said that, Alistair shook his head. Elsa, we can't just brush this off so easily. Something dangerous could have happened to you. Alistair felt that if they let this slide, Violet might do something even bolder next time. He decided to take action. All right, when Violet comes back. What? Are you sure? I was shocked by Alistair's determined words. But looking into his eyes, I could see he was serious. Understood. If anything happens, I'll be on your side. With that, I decided to fully support Alistair. I contacted Siegfried, who was on a company trip, to tell him what had happened today.
I'll come back right away.
But since Violet wouldn't be back until Sunday, I told him to enjoy his trip. I didn't want to disrupt both Alistair's and Siegfried's plans just for me. When I conveyed this, he reluctantly agreed. Got it. I'll hurry back as soon as it's over. Yeah. Thanks. I also discussed with Siegfried how we would proceed. When I shared Alistair's plan, he agreed without hesitation. Yeah. I agree with Dad. Mom won't reflect on her actions otherwise. Everyone except Violet was preparing behind the scenes for her return. Sunday evening arrived in no time.
Ah, that was fun.
Violet came back, singing happily. We were hiding, so she thought she was alone at home. Well, let's open it up for her.
She's heading there.
Violet went towards the basement. She unlocked and opened the door. Violet probably expected to find me there, shivering and blue from the cold. But no one was there.
What? Where did she go?
As Violet shouted, we spoke from behind her. We're right here. Violet spun around quickly. When she saw Alistair and Siegfried glaring at her, she immediately understood that they knew everything. What? Are you still taking the side of this useless wife?
She's not a useless wife. She's Elsa. And it's not about taking sides. Violet, you're completely in the wrong. Apologize now.
Alistair's tone was lower than usual. He was clearly very angry.
Locking her up for 3 days is unthinkable. It's insane.
Siegfried joined in to back up Alistair. Violet, frustrated by their constant support for me, retorted. Ah, yes. Sorry. I thought you had gone out too and accidentally locked the door. It wasn't on purpose. Violet tried to get away with a half-hearted apology. There was no way I would accept such an apology, and neither would Alistair or Siegfried. Mom, apologize properly. We gave her another chance, but Violet, feeling disrespected by Siegfried, responded even more defiantly.
I already did. I don't need to repeat it over and over.
She turned her back on us. Usually, Siegfried or Alistair would sigh and give in at this point. Violet thought this time would be no different. But Alistair had made up his mind on what to say before Violet returned. I can't put up with your behavior any longer. Let's get a divorce. At those words, Violet immediately turned back. Violet widened her eyes and stared at Alistair, asking him,
Why? This is a problem between Elsa and me. It has nothing to do with you, Alistair. And just so you know, threatening divorce won't work.
No, I've been thinking about it for a while. But we've been together for decades, and the affection I had for you made it hard to take the step. However, after this incident, I can clearly say it. I don't want to live with you anymore. I don't even want to think of you as family. After he finished speaking, no one said a word, and only the sound of the air conditioner filled the silence. Violet didn't respond immediately, likely because she realized that Alistair's words were his true feelings. Her face was pale, and she looked like she might collapse at any moment. So that's it. I got the divorce papers from the city hall yesterday, and I've already filled out my part. We're going to submit them right away. As the reality of the divorce sank in, Violet's breathing became erratic. She pinched herself, hoping this was a nightmare rather than reality.
No, you think I'm going to get divorced? Because of this woman.
She glared at me, pointing as she shouted. But Siegfried and Alistair quickly defended me.
That's what I couldn't stand. If you had sincerely apologized, I might have reconsidered.
Hinting there might have been a chance, Violet immediately turned to apologize to me. I'm sorry. I went too far with my mean behavior. I'll be careful from now on. Will you forgive me? She tried to earn forgiveness with her quick change of attitude. Thinking she really didn't want a divorce that badly, I expressed my opinion. It doesn't sound like a genuine apology. I can't accept it like this. Hearing this, Violet's face contorted with anger. But noticing Alistair watching, she quickly snapped back to her senses. What are you saying? I'm genuinely apologizing. She forced a smile at me. But it was clear she wasn't smiling inside. Seeing through her, Alistair spoke up.
Enough already. No matter how much you apologize now, no one will believe it's sincere. It only leaves a sense of distrust.
Alistair cut off even her attempt to apologize, leaving divorce as the only option. Violet finally collapsed to her knees and cried.
Why does everyone treat me so harshly? Men just prefer younger women, don't they?
Crying, she lamented why she was the only one not being defended. Alistair and Siegfried looked at her with exasperation. Just so you know, Mom, you're the one who started this by bad-mouthing Elsa and doing awful things. If you hadn't done anything to Elsa, we wouldn't have needed to defend her. Alistair nodded in agreement with Siegfried's calm remark. Violet now regretted her actions that led to this situation. Then we moved to the living room and surrounded Violet to make her sign the divorce papers. Her hands trembled, and the writing on the divorce papers was barely legible. After signing, Alistair immediately headed to the city hall. All right, Siegfried, take care of things while I'm at the city hall. With that request, Siegfried spoke to Violet. Okay, Mom, let's pack up your things. Siegfried started packing Violet's belongings into boxes he'd previously bought from the supermarket. Mom, do you want to go back to your parents' house for now? He even asked about the shipping address, determined to make her leave. Violet could only stand there, mouth agape, as Siegfried acted mercilessly. By the time Alistair returned home, the packing into boxes was finished, and they had loaded the car and taken the boxes to the post office. Alistair and Siegfried went to the post office together, leaving just Violet and me at the house.
Thank you for everything, even if it was just for a short while.
I offered a ceremonial thank you, but Violet, still clearly angry, muttered,
I will never forgive you.
After that, we stopped talking. No matter how angry Violet was, I knew I wasn't wrong. I stood my ground, unafraid of Violet's anger. As the two were about to return, Violet seemed to decide to go back to her parents' house. I heard her sniffling, but my feelings remained unchanged as I watched her leave. When Alistair and Siegfried returned, I told them Violet had left, and they seemed relieved.
Elsa, I'm really sorry for what Violet put you through.
No, it's fine, Alistair.
Thank you again.
I nodded to Alistair, who waved his hand, looking embarrassed.
I'm the one who should apologize for my ex-wife scaring you. I'm really sorry.
Then Alistair offered,
Now that I'm single, I could give this house to Siegfried and you.
Or if you prefer, I can help with renting an apartment. He was suggesting options for our future living arrangements. Siegfried, considerate as always, left the choice to me.
Actually,
I shared my wishes regarding our living situation, and both Alistair and Siegfried agreed without any objections. Several years passed, and we had a child, who is now 2 years old. When asked about our living arrangements, I was actually pregnant. Even Siegfried didn't know until I revealed it then. I expressed my desire.
I want to continue living here with Alistair. With a new member in the family, I hope to create many happy memories together.
Hearing this, both Alistair and Siegfried's faces lit up with joy.
That sounds great. Dad will have fun living with his grandchild too. Well, I guess I won't have time for golf anymore.
Alistair was overjoyed at having a grandchild. Now, he adores the child every day. Seeing Siegfried and Alistair playing with our child often made me think.
Poor Violet, she doesn't even know she has a grandchild.
We had decided not to inform her, as it would only cause trouble. Violet was forcibly sent back to her parents and was severely scolded. Even they couldn't believe she had angered the usually gentle Alistair so much. Violet had low credibility even in her own family. With no one to trust, she would likely lead a miserable life from now on. Having lived off Alistair's earnings, she now had to fend for herself at her parents' home. Her parents, living on a pension, couldn't afford to support her. After decades as a housewife, Violet had to find work. Her arrogant attitude and demands for a higher wage during interviews made it difficult for her to hold a job. Lacking work experience, she would now face the harsh realities of society. Regretting her past behavior towards me, Violet would live each day in regret. Thinking about it gave me a sense of relief. I soon forgot my anger and even Violet's existence, enjoying my life now. Rather than clinging to past grievances like Violet, it's far better to wish for future happiness. Watching our child grow, I will continue living happily with Alistair and Siegfried. The tie I handed over was thrown into the trash can at the corner of the room the next moment. I was dumbfounded by Mike's action.
The last thing I need is cheap trash.
Did you even check inside?
Huh?
On the other side of my astonished husband, Sarah was laughing. I met Mike's eyes before slowly shifting my gaze to Sarah.
You don't think that was from your sister, do you? Sorry, it's so cheap.
Sarah was furious. Seeing her like that, Mike was quite shaken.
No, I thought that was something Mary had prepared. As if anything prepared by Mary could just be thrown away.
I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement at Sarah's furious figure. I'm going to expose all of Mike's actions right here. I took a deep breath. I am Mary, a 47-year-old housewife with a part-time job. Thanks to getting married almost immediately after graduating from college and having children right away, my second life has already started. Even though I say that, Mike is still actively working, and since I've been working a full-time part-time job for about 10 years, we don't go on trips or anything like that. So, honestly, this second life is just a name, and in the end, I'm living a life no different from usual. Mike and I met in college. It was a normal college, but the club activities were active, and among them, the basketball team was one of the strongest in the nation. Mike was the captain of the basketball team. Tall and well-built, he was the captain and the ace. At that time, Mike was very popular, and I, being one of the managers, thought I had no chance. But he approached me, and then he confessed his feelings. I was so happy. The proposal came when I was in my 4th year of college, with Mike already working and able to support us, asking me to marry him. My parents, having been college sweethearts themselves, didn't object, and we got married half a year into my senior year of college. It was a simple wedding, but it was well done, and I was happy. The first year after marriage was very smooth. Since the company Mike joined had frequent relocations, I decided not to become a full-time employee and continued with the part-time job I had at the time. However, I found out I was pregnant just before graduating from college, and to reassure a worried Mike, I resigned. During the pregnancy, my sister-in-law Sarah and my in-laws, who lived nearby, were very kind and helpful, and I was truly glad to have married. However, after our daughter Jane was born, our marital life gradually drifted away from the ideal. Jane, who often cried at night, would start crying unless held during the day, and as a first-time parent who knew nothing about child-rearing, I struggled to balance it with household chores. Although my in-laws and Sarah helped, there inevitably came times when I had to do it alone. Each time, I would hide and cry by myself. Mike, at first, showed a supportive attitude, but gradually began to go out more often for drinks and such, and by the time Jane was 6 months old, he had completely stopped helping with the household chores. Even when I begged him to spend a little more time with Jane, he would reluctantly stay for about 10 minutes before calling me over to take her and going out himself. "Hey, I wish you could spend a little more time with Jane. I'm busy, you know." When I said that, Mike would sigh heavily and condescendingly lecture me. "You wouldn't understand since you've never been out in society, but being an adult is tough. I need to refresh on my days off to survive. Understand?" I absolutely despised the way Mike lightly tapped my head as he said that. However, it's true that Mike was providing for us, and it's also true that I didn't know society. So, every time he said that, I would swallow my words, and eventually, I stopped asking Mike for anything. Thus, Mike continued a life that hardly resembled that of a caring father, only paying attention to Jane when it suited him, for over 20 years. But then he began to take an active interest in Jane. "Jane, let's go out."
Okay.
Every weekend, I would see the two of them off as they went out together, and I would take care of the household chores. Thanks to starting a part-time job about 10 years ago, we had a bit more financial leeway, but chores would pile up, so I had to clean and prepare meals in advance during the weekends. Up until about 3 years ago, Jane was on my side. She would help out and give me presents. But ever since she started going out with him, she completely became Mike's ally. The reason was simple: Mike would buy her something every week. Jane, coming home with shopping bags full of new clothes and accessories in both hands, initially confused but now delightedly heads straight to her room to have her own fashion show. Buying her expensive things every week might be a bit much. Huh? Are you jealous of Jane? Can't help it. She's cuter than a middle-aged woman like you. Mike said with a laugh and went to Jane's room. Indeed, Jane is lively and bright like Mike, and beautiful. She probably knows it, too, with looks that wouldn't be out of place on a celebrity. As for me, it's inevitable that I be called plain. But I am only 45 years old. I shouldn't be referred to as a middle-aged woman. Angered, I decided to confront Mike and Jane and headed to Jane's room. But just as I was about to open the door, I overheard a shocking conversation.
Dad, this is really cute. Thank you.
It suits you. Just like my daughter.
Tell Emma thanks, too. I've wanted something matching with her.
Emma is beautiful, too. The clerk said we looked like a beautiful mother and daughter today.
Really? That makes me happy.
I couldn't understand what the two of them were talking about. Beautiful mother and daughter? Who and who? Weren't they going out together every week? I was dumbfounded, my hand still on the doorknob. I couldn't even wipe away the tears rolling down my cheeks, my body wouldn't move. Unaware of me, Jane and Mike laughed and talked about their next outing. I couldn't stand how much I hated them. The next day, I stopped by a detective agency on my way home from my part-time job. The clerk there was very kind, and I ended up pouring out everything I had been holding in. And just like that, I contracted them to investigate Mike and his activities. Months later, when I received the investigation results, I was dumbfounded. Mike was meeting his mistress nearly every day, and on weekends, he would take Jane on long trips. As I read further, even more shocking details came to light. You've got to be kidding. I was furious at Mike's incredibly disloyal actions. I couldn't forgive him, I would have my revenge. Just then, a message arrived on my mobile phone. It was from Sarah, asking if I would like to join them at the in-laws' house to celebrate Mike's promotion. I hadn't heard a word about Mike getting a promotion, but I resolved to reply to Sarah with my acceptance. I didn't want to buy a gift for the celebration, but it would be strange if I was the only one who didn't bring anything. With that in mind, I decided to let Sarah help me pick something out. The tie we bought from a high-brand store that makes custom suits cost $300. We'll put it in a plain paper bag so he won't immediately realize what's inside.
It's a surprise. I hope he'll be happy.
Yes, indeed. Imagining the joy on her brother's face, Sarah seemed excited, which made me feel a bit guilty, but my desire for revenge on Mike was stronger. I proceeded with my plan. And on the day of Mike's promotion celebration, seeing the plain paper bag I was holding as we left the house, Mike clearly looked disappointed. But he said nothing more, and we headed to the in-laws. Upon arrival, we joined Mike's parents and Sarah at the table, enjoying a pleasant meal together the whole time. Let's give him the presents now. Who wants to go first?
Me. Congratulations, Dad.
Jane handed him a brandless handkerchief. Though neatly boxed, it didn't seem very expensive. Mike received it with a smile. Unusual for brand-loving Mike. Thinking this, I took the box containing the tie out of the paper bag and handed it to Mike. Congratulations on your promotion. This is from me and... The tie I handed over was thrown into the trash can at the corner of the room the next moment. I was dumbfounded by Mike's action.
I don't need cheap trash.
Did you even check inside?
Huh?
Sarah was laughing on the other side of my astonished husband. I met Mike's eyes before slowly shifting my gaze to Sarah.
You don't think that was from your sister, do you? Sorry, it's so cheap.
Sarah was furious. Seeing her like that, Mike was quite shaken.
I thought that was something Mary had prepared. As if anything prepared by Mary could just be thrown away.
I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement at Sarah's furious figure. I'm going to expose all of Mike's actions right here. I took a deep breath. Sarah, it's okay. I don't mind. But really, it's okay. After all, I don't need a gift from someone I'm divorcing. Everyone present was shocked by my words. Mike was trembling, but still tried to calm himself and spoke to me in a soothing voice.
Divorce? I admit I went too far just now. I'll apologize.
It's not just about what happened now. You know that, don't you? Mike was puzzled, unable to grasp my real intention. Amidst this, Jane's carefree voice could be heard. It's fine if they get divorced. It's none of my business anyway. Jane. Susan chided Jane as she twirled her long hair, but Jane didn't stop. I mean, being told that someone who barely went out into society and is just an ordinary middle-aged woman is my mother doesn't make me happy. I'd be much happier with someone who understands fashion. Jane was probably referring to Mike's mistress. Unaware that I knew about it, Mike looked a bit awkward, to whom I smiled. Right, Emma, was it? She would make Jane happier, wouldn't she?
How do you know about Emma?
Mike panicked when Emma's name, his mistress, suddenly came out of my mouth. Next to him, Jane's attitude remained unchanged. I spoke sarcastically to the two of them. You've lost your love for me and want to remarry, right? Unfortunately, I don't have such a partner or the time.
No, well...
Mike suddenly became hesitant as everyone's gaze focused on him. Jane, perhaps realizing something was off, stopped playing with her hair and looked at Mike. Making up reasons for cheating and making Jane believe them, you really don't want to look bad, do you?
What do you mean?
Jane confronted Mike, puzzled. After all, Mike had told Jane that I was cheating and considering divorce. When Emma was introduced, he said it was still a secret because I was reluctant to divorce, but he intended to marry her as soon as possible. My head hurt when I found out. I had never cheated, and the only reason I was rarely home was because of increased part-time job hours. Lying and bribing your daughter with gifts is the lowest a parent could go.
Dad, you said Mom was cheating, and you wanted a divorce, but she was refusing, right? Was that a lie?
It's not a lie, but...
If it's not a lie, then why is Mom so confident?
Jane's shrill voice echoed in the room. I responded calmly. It was more convenient to deceive you. That way, it would be easier to see Jane after the divorce, or for him to return to his parents' house, probably for reasons like that.
It's a lie, a lie.
Jane repeated it's a lie as if she couldn't believe my words. Mike was pale and frozen. I handed him the divorce papers.
Wait on the divorce.
You plan to marry Emma, right? Jane seems to get along with her, so there shouldn't be a problem?
But we've been married for over 20 years. There are feelings.
What you have isn't feelings for me, but for the money you don't want to part with as alimony, right? When I spoke plainly, Mike grimaced and glared at me. Even if he was hit right on the mark, he was no longer the man I once admired, just a middle-aged man. I realized then that his love for me was gone. Is that true? Sarah's voice echoed in the quiet room. Mike started to tremble. In this house, the most frightening person isn't the in-laws but Sarah. Sarah, who had been cheated on in her youth and had broken off an engagement, has remained single since. Unlike Mike, Sarah graduated from a top university and was so beautiful that men constantly pursued her even after her engagement was broken off. But Sarah rejected them all.
You know how much I despise men who cheat, right?
Yes.
Then why did you do this? What did you want to achieve by hurting Mary?
Sarah spoke calmly, but a quiet anger could be felt in her voice, silencing not just Mike but everyone in the room. Mike was so pale and trembling, He looked as if he might collapse.
What you can do now is sign the divorce papers, pay the compensation, and then cut ties with our family. Got it? Cut ties? Why? Because I don't want a despicable man to be part of the family.
Shocked by Sarah's words, Mike hung his head. It must have been hard for Mike, who has a bit of a sister complex. He signed the divorce papers and then started crying softly, his body shaking.
Mary is the one who should be crying. You have no right to cry.
Sarah's words were like a final blow, and Mike had no response. I presented another document to Mike, delivering the final strike.
Emma left this for you. You met with Emma?
Mike, who perked up at Emma's name, panicked upon seeing the contents of the document I presented. It was about the compensation claims.
What do you mean by compensation claims?
Well, you lied about being single, right?
Ah.
Mike had completely forgotten that he had lied. In fact, Mike and Emma met at a high-end hotel's matchmaking party, where Mike had forged documents to attend as a single man and approached Emma. He even went as far as to say that the reason for his divorce was his ex-wife's cheating, claiming the divorce was finalized but his ex-wife wouldn't leave, causing trouble for him and his daughter, but she was just doing housekeeping now, so he was dealing with it as hiring a housekeeper. He continued to say that once a new partner was found, his ex-wife would give up on reconciliation and leave, asking Emma to wait a bit longer. When I heard this from Emma herself, I was furious. After showing her our marriage certificate and explaining that we were not divorced and I had not cheated, Emma apologized repeatedly. She offered to pay compensation, but I had no intention of claiming it since she had been misled into thinking Mike was single. Emma has a message for you. Never show your face to her again.
Ah.
Mike must have been planning to have Emma support him financially in exchange for paying me compensation. His expression was one of utter despair. Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Jane apologized from next to a silent Mike. I have no need for a daughter who can't distinguish right from wrong at 25 and disrespects her mother. No need to apologize.
Mom.
Once the divorce is finalized, leave my house.
Why?
Jane asked, to which I sighed. The house we lived in was actually in my name. It was left to me when a relative passed away, and I became the owner when Mike and I started living there. I had mentioned this to Jane before, but she seemed to have completely forgotten. Your attitude towards your mother is unforgivable, and the period for reconciliation has passed. I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave with your dad.
I'll apologize. Come on, Mom. Let's live together again. Please.
Jane screamed in desperation, but I looked at her coldly. Then, Susan, who had been silent until now, spoke up.
Mike and Jane, please never come back here again. But Mom.
Mike looked up at Susan's words. Susan was furious. Seeing her like that, Mike couldn't hide his shock and started crying heavily. Jane was just frozen, shocked by the usually gentle Susan's transformation.
I don't want to talk to people who hurt others like you do. Please leave. So,
after Susan's declaration, Joe, my father-in-law, stood up, grabbed Mike by his clothes, forced him to stand, and dragged him to the front door, pushing him out of the house. Mike initially banged on the door and shouted to be let in, but as neighbors started to gather, he eventually left with Jane. In the quiet of the in-laws' house, now that Mike and Jane were gone, I savored the coffee and cake Susan offered, enjoying some peace for the first time in a while. After that, I submitted the divorce papers. With the compensation from Mike, I've become somewhat wealthy. As for Mike, not only did I take all his hidden savings, but his forgery at the matchmaking party became widely known after a colleague who had also attended the party exposed him at work. As a result, he lost his credibility and, despite his recent promotion, was sidelined. Jane made a big mistake at work and, although she wasn't fired, her salary was significantly cut. Moreover, I heard she got involved with a married coworker and is currently being sued for compensation by his wife. I couldn't help but think of them as two peas in a pod, almost feeling detached from their plight. The two of them have been living together after being kicked out of the house. However, since I did all the household chores, neither of them knows how to manage a home. The house is a mess. They constantly eat out due to their inability to cook, which has drained their finances, and they seem to argue every day. Emma, after breaking up with Mike, married her childhood friend. I've heard through the grapevine that she's now the mother of twins. Despite being deeply hurt by Mike, it's comforting to know she has moved on to a happier future. I was relieved. I was worried that my relationship with my in-laws and Sarah would end because of Mike's actions, but we're still close. Sarah says I'm her sister, and something like this won't sever our bond. I'm grateful to be part of such a kind family. And, surprisingly, Sarah has recently found a boyfriend. He's 5 years older than her, a kind man who managed to soften Sarah's firm resolve against marriage. Susan, who sneakily bought a bridal magazine. It's a secret. And was reading it in her room, shared her secret with me, looking so endearing it warmed my heart. As for me, I was offered a full-time position at the company where I was working part-time and have been working hard. Life is as busy as ever, but living for myself alone is quite enjoyable. Selling the house and starting to live on my own was a shock, especially since all my belongings fit into just one cardboard box. Now, I'm gradually acquiring furniture that suits my taste. Living surrounded by things I love makes me incredibly happy, and no matter how busy I am, coming home always rejuvenates me, fueling my energy for the next day. I even think to myself that I should have done this much sooner. Recently, a coworker offered to give me a cat. The idea of living with a cat doesn't sound too bad. With these thoughts in my mind, I'm determined to live my life in my own way today as well.